So, good morning, friends, and welcome back to the online learning platform with Department of Civil Engineering. I'm Rajesh Gopinath, and you are with me for the course Occupational Health and Safety. In the previous session, we had discussed about the act, that is the Occupational Safety and Health Act of 1970. In the previous session, we had understood the various sections. There were totally 34 sections and an additional section at the appendix, which is the historical remarks or historical section. So we had understood briefly what each section describes. In today's presentation, my dear friends, I will take you through the evolution of the same act. How exactly did OSHA commence? How did it begin? So in this slide, what you see, this is the flow with respect to today's presentation. And finally, I shall be summarizing and listing the references for your kind perusal. My dear friends, to begin with, okay, if you go back to 2100 BC, probably we can connect Osha with Hammurabi itself. He was a Mesopotamian ruler, okay, and the Hammurabi code is very popular because he speaks about law, he speaks about punishments, and interestingly, whatever he speaks about is connected to safety and health. Okay, in simple words, as a civil engineer, if I need to connect this statement, you will be shocked if I tell you that Hammurabi's codes had the following mentions. If a civil engineer constructs a building and if the owner of the house dies because the building collapses, then the punishment is the civil engineer also has to be hanged. If the civil engineer constructs a house, the building collapses, and the son or the daughter of the owner dies, the punishment is for the son or the daughter of the constructor. Okay, that is how, that is popularly why we say eye for an eye, nail for a nail, toe for a toe. This is the Hammurabi's code. But let me tell you, friends, when we speak about the Hammurabi's code, he basically introduced the attempts, okay, with respect to compensating the victims. Okay, but what we need to understand is majorly he had targeted only the personal injuries and losses, and for the same he had scheduled a series of punishments and as well payments for the guilty party. Okay, now moving on, we have Hippocrates. We also have Pliny the Elder. Now Hippocrates is actually called as the father of medicine, and Pliny is basically a Roman physician or a scientist. So friends, I'm basically talking about Greek and Roman physicians. You know, these people used to practice between 400 BC and 300 AD. Basically both of these gentlemen, they had focused upon the health of individuals, okay, and essentially their focus was on metals, that is people who dealt with metals during this era. So I'm talking about goldsmith, ironsmith, and so forth. Okay, so that is where the progress happened, and they actually were concerned for the health of those individuals who were primarily connected to that occupation. Okay, then we move on to Galen, okay, the 2nd century. So he was actually a Roman physician. Okay, he actually spoke and he actually wrote about occupational diseases. Primarily he had connected the danger of acid mist with copper mines. Now apart from this, he also was concerned, he spoke about and he preached about the dangers which were connected with mining, tanning, and chemical occupations. Okay, now moving on, let's understand with respect to the era, with respect to the Renaissance. Now before the European Renaissance, we actually have very little information, very limited information on the European injuries or illnesses. Okay, but moving further, there were certain reports of scribes, that is your medieval scribes, which spoke about, you know, people suffering from lead poison. And you know, usually during those days there was a common practice of people tipping their quills with their tongues before they dip into the metallic ink solutions. Okay, now this was repeatedly observed during the 15th century, but unfortunately nothing much has been spoken about further than this. But during the European Renaissance, there were several physicians, several chemists who started observing, who started noticing the relationship between the occupational activities and the relevant health and safety aspects. Okay, now let's move further. We are speaking about, Ulrich Ellenberg. Okay, now this gentleman, in the year 1437, he made a startling discovery. He recognized that the vapors of certain metals, such as lead and mercury, they were basically very dangerous, and he actually started describing the symptoms of industrial poisoning from these heavy metals. My dear friends, please understand, during this period, he also became aware of diseases which were connected among miners, basically, lung diseases, and also with respect to asbestos. So, if I need to summarize the work of Ulrich Ellenberg, typically we can say that he made a startling information on the poisonous and noxious vapors, which was connected to any individual who was working with metals or heavy metals. Now, moving further, we have one more important observation. The gentleman you see on the right hand side is Bernardo Ramazzini. Okay, he's actually an Italian physician, and around 1700, okay, he wrote a book. Okay, I might actually call it as the first treatise on occupational diseases. The book was called as The Disease of Workers, or in Italy, as it has been described, Temobis artificium diatribe. Okay, this gentleman is actually considered by some people as the father of occupational medicine, and by some others as the father of industrial hygiene. Now, what is very, very important here is, whenever he used to meet patients, okay, as a physician, the first question he used to ask them is, what do you do? Where do you work? What is your trade? Okay, and by receiving the response from the workers or the patients, he was able to address what could be the probable cause of the disease. So friends, we are now trying to step into a domain wherein the physicians have started connecting diseases with respect to the occupation. In fact, he often educated the students who worked under him. He motivated them, he urged them that they should start learning. Apart from medical science, they also should start learning about the nature of occupational diseases which can arise in any shop, any mines, or any industries. Okay, now further moving on, from 1760 to 1840, there were a lot of dramatic advances in the technology. Okay, it is during this period that Dr. Percival Pott, the gentleman you see on the left hand screen, okay, he identified scrotal cancer. He was the first person to understand that cancer can be caused in the workers who were working in cleaning the chimneys. As you can see, the two individuals on the right hand side. Okay, so these individuals were basically, exposed to coal tar and soot, and due to continuous exposure and inhalation, cancer was a prominent disease among them, and among them scrotal cancer. This very important observation Dr. Percival Pott did led to the historical Chimney Sweep Act. Okay, and this Chimney Sweep Acts, they were basically promulgated between 1788 to 1875. So this is one very important observation that you need to understand, that an act has been brought in. Okay, I'll repeat, a act has been brought in wherein somebody has spoken about occupational safety and health. Of course, in this particular case, the occupation is chimney sweep. Now, after this, there was one more important observation which was carried out by Sir Robert Peel. Now, he was a mill owner. Okay, and he made several attempts to make the English Parliament aware about the deplorable, the pathetic and bad working conditions in mills. Okay, now he also advocated that, due to the working conditions, the life expectancy was coming down. Typically, based on a study that he carried out, he found out that, literally the life expectancy was reduced by 50%. So, yeah, simple example would be, if there are, if in a house there are two individuals, X and Y, let's say two sisters. If sister X works in a mill and sister Y doesn't work in a mill, sister X, can live up to, let's say, 30 years, but sister Y can live up to 60 years. So that was a startling information that he found out. Now, typically, we now move ahead and we have entered the era of industrial revolution. And you know very well that once industrial revolution came, there was, new machineries, more moving belts, pulleys, and gear systems. Now, it is not just the toxic fumes you're talking about, you're also speaking about the heat which is being generated due to the movement of these machineries. Okay. Now, during the Industrial Revolution, the typical pattern which was observed is long work days, unsanitary conditions, and of course the highly demanding physical labor, which eventually led to likelihood of injuries and illness of this new workforce. Okay. Now, at the dawn of your Industrial Revolution, people started becoming more observant of these problems, and there was this gentleman called Charles Takra. Okay. Now, he started studying. He basically studied the effect of arts, trades, life habits, civic states, and professions with respect to health and longevity. Now, he was the first person. He basically, what he did is he started employing the basic principles of occupational medicine, and therefore, my dear friends, he became the first physician in the English speaking world who started practicing industrial medication or industrial medicine. In fact, his writings have also led to a wide raised public awareness. So, which means that now the public or the worker or the working class also became aware of the ills of occupations. Okay. Now, moving ahead, in the year 1842, a British lawyer and a sanitarian, that was Mr. Edwin Chadwick. Okay. Now, he started writing about the deplorable conditions of the factory workers. He started expressing the plight and the pain that those people were having, and he started a report. His report was basically the sanitary conditions of the laboring people of Great Britain. Now, the interesting observation that this gentleman or this lawyer made was, he found that the life expectancy of the workers were reducing also because of air pollution, the same air pollution which was caused due to the machineries. Okay. And due to the toxic fumes coming from the heavy metals. Now, moving on, let's move on from Great Britain. Let's go on to United States of America, or let's say America, for instance. Okay. Now, in Massachusetts, during those days, there were a lot of women and girls, as young as, let's say, 6 to 10 years. They used to, they were the one of the most employed group, and they used to work for long hours, let's say, for right from the morning to the evening. And these kind of works expected them to stand for long times or sit for long times. And no, now that you're talking about Industrial Revolution, you're basically speaking about machineries, you're speaking about equipments. So you had, these ladies, these girls, they were actually exposed to the threats, the danger of moving machines. Okay, the spinning wheels. And unfortunately, it has resulted in many of them getting injured, losing their fingers, losing their hands. Important outcome of these accidents basically was, in the year 1877, Massachusetts, basically they passed a regulation which clearly stated that any machinery, okay, which can cause a potential threat to your physical parts, they must have safeguards. Okay. Probably that is why, if you have any motor which is, present or available in your house, okay, you might see that that motor has a moving part, but it is not exposed to you, it has been covered. Had it not been covered, there are dangers wherein, your finger, your hand, or any moving part, body part can get cut off. Okay. Now, another important thing is, with respect to the regulation that they passed in 1877, they also made it very clear that any liability, okay, it is entirely connected with the employer. That is, the employer is totally responsible for any danger or any hazard which might have happened. Now, let's move on further, and let's understand something more interesting. My dear friends, the OSHA, that is Occupational Safety Health Act of 1970. Okay, it was actually, we need to give the credit to the President William Howard Taft. Okay. Now, what he did is, just moments before he had to step down, and the next president, if I'm not mistaken, it is Woodrow Wilson. Okay. Before the next president had to take over, what he did is he passed a bill. Okay. He passed a bill wherein he ensured that the Department of Labor was established. So, my dear friend, this is one of the great steps which has been taken in the modern era, which is connected to your occupational safety and health. And from whom? From a person, from the US president, who just passed it few hours before he had to step down. Okay, then the next important development is from a lady. Okay, you can see on your right hand screen, Dr. Alice Hamilton. This lady is considered to be the founder of industrial medicine in America. She was basically a special investigator for the Bureau of Labor in the Department of Labor. She had carried out a lot of studies, she had traveled a lot. Okay, and she carried out a very important study on the white lead industry. Okay, now as a result of all her hard work and observations, several laws were established, and these laws were established primarily on job related safety measures. And post 1930s, okay, several states in America had similar safety laws. Now let's move further and try to understand year wise, decade wise, how the law had improvised. Now friends, in the year 1833, that is in United Kingdom. Okay, in United Kingdom, uh, the first thing that they did was they introduced the formation of your factory inspectorate. Okay, now the main objective of this inspectorate was they had the rights, they had the freedom, okay, to enter any industries, okay, inspect any industries, and their prime objective was to make sure that there should not be any form of injuries to any textile worker who is a child. Now, a very important observation here, their focus was to make sure that there is no prevention of injury. Okay, sorry, that there should not be any injury to any child textile worker. So you should understand that during that time, even children were employed. Okay, child labor was something which was predominant. Okay, now moving on from 1833 to 1837, again we are way back in United Kingdom. There's a very famous case, okay, which is called the Priestley versus the Fowler case. Now as an outcome of this case, okay, occupation safety and health was mandated, it was incepted into the common law of the United Kingdom. Now, further in 1840, again with United Kingdom, the Royal Commission had published findings. Their findings were with respect to the state of condition of the workers in the mining industry. Okay, and when this report came out, this report which had information which was about the apathy of all these workers and the high frequency of accidents. Okay, when this report came out, there was a huge public outrage. Okay, that means the public, the working class was becoming more and more aware of this. As an outcome of this, in the year, okay, in the year 1842, I'm sorry for the typos in the screen, it is not 1942. In the year 1842, Mines Act was brought about, and as a result of this Mines Act, okay, they created an inspectorate for mines in collieries. Okay, now this actually led to several safety improvements and prosecutions. Okay, that is, at any point of time, these inspectors could enter and inspect premises at their discretion. Okay, this is probably by the year 1850 I'm talking. Okay, now let's move on from United Kingdom to United States. In 1880 in US, okay, there was a voluntary establishment of a body called as ASME, the American Society of Mechanical Engineers. Okay, now this is one of the first standardizing bodies, and the reason that this body had to come up was because, you know, probably every year there were several fatalities due to explosions, fatalities, you know, crossing 50,000, and most of these explosions were related to pressure systems, let's say boiler systems, whether it's the land or the sea. Okay, now moving on, in 1883 and 1884 in Germany, okay, in Europe, there was a very huge development. There was a gentleman called as Otto von Bismarck, okay, and he brought about what is the first social insurance legislation in the Western world. Okay, that credit goes to him. Now, after this, in the very following year, we had the first workers' compensation law. Okay, now what is interesting here is because of these laws being introduced in Germany, and because of the awareness which was created among workers in the same nation and other nations, okay, there was several labor unrest which was created in many other countries, and because of which those nations were also forced to introduce these laws. Okay, now let's move on. Friends, when we speak about the Occupational Safety Health Act of 1970, let me tell you that the actual root of this act was from Britain, okay, from 17th century. Okay, now the British Factory Act remains the basic fundamental act for the evolution of your OSH Act 1970. Now, modeled on this British Factory Act, in the year 1884, the state of Ontario also introduced what is called as a Factory Act. Okay, so in US, the Factory Act of 1884 was one of its first kind of act which dealt with occupation, health, and safety. Okay, now typically in this act, no, they spoke about prohibitions on the work activities of women and children. They spoke about, reducing the work hours, but unfortunately, this act was kind of vague. Okay, there were no proper definitions, and probably it was not at all enforceable. But yes, it was a beginning, and this is something which led to 1964. In the year 1960, there was a disaster and 5 workers had died. And this incident, or this unfortunate accident, it led to what is called as Industrial Safety Act, which was brought about in 1964. Now, what happened is the word safety was introduced. I'll repeat, the word safety was introduced into your Factory Act. The word safety was defined. And this act was now renamed as Industrial Safety Act of 1964. So, what does the word safety speak about? In this act, the word safety speaks about freedom from injury to body, okay, or freedom from damage to health. Okay, now slowly what started happening is, with so many acts rolling in, okay, in the late 60s, the workers were beginning to openly criticize, okay, the employers who were not introducing safety measures in their place. Okay, now as a result of this, even the government was forced to bring about laws and enforce the laws into the industries. Now, one very important thing which happened is, probably in the year 1974, the uranium miners in Elliott Lake, okay, they were kind of concerned because there were a lot of incidents of workers suffering from lung cancer and silicosis. And they were able to understand that, these diseases were somehow connected to their occupation. Eventually, they went on strike. Okay, explaining that, their health is deteriorating and the safety conditions are not up to the mark. As a result of this, the government then, they appointed what is called as a royal commission. Now, their job was to investigate whether the health and safety aspects in the uranium mine is up to the mark or not. This commission was actually chaired by Dr. James Ham. Therefore, it is very popularly called as the Ham's Commission. Okay, now this commission introduced what is called as more than 100 recommendations to improve the deplorable conditions of mining. Okay, now another major observation, or outcome or evolution of the Ham's Commission is, he had introduced the idea of internal responsibility system. Okay, in simple words, there should be a joint health and safety commission wherein the employer, the employee, and the government has to work together, has to interact, so that the health and safety is a priority and can be improvised. Okay, and as a consequence of this internal responsibility system, there were further several evolutions, and that, say, you may start from 1975. Okay, in 1975, he recommended what is called as the joint committee. Now, in 1976, okay, there was a bill which was passed, bill 139. Okay, this bill 139 basically established the Employees Health and Safety Act. Now, as a result of this act, the ministers can order joint committees. Now, 2 years later, that is 1978, there was a bill passed, Bill 70. Okay, and this is where, my dear friends, the Bill 70 established what you popularly know as Occupational Health and Safety Act. Okay, now as an outcome of this, it is necessary that you have mandatory joint committees in many workplaces. Now, moving on, in 1987, there was a bill passed, that is Bill 79. So, as an outcome of this, it was very important that every employer should add information to the information system, and this information is pertinent to the hazardous materials or hazardous conditions connected to a workplace. So as a result of this, everyone will be aware of what is that they are facing or they are working along with. Okay, in 1990, there was a bill passed, that is Bill 208, Bill 208. Okay, basically it was an amendment. Okay, the amendment was about broadening the requirement for joint committees. Okay, the idea is you need to have certified people. That is, any XYZ cannot become a member. So these people should have experience, they should have knowledge, they should have expertise, and only those certified members can be allowed to be a part of the joint committee. And another major outcome of this act was right to stop the work. Okay, so that is how the OSH Act has evolved. So if you get to know that the workers are protesting, they're calling for a strike, it is probably because in the amendment of 1990 that provision has been made available for them. So friends, we have come to the end of the presentation. So what did we understand today? We basically understood how the Occupational Safety and Health Act has evolved. Okay, right from the era of Hammurabi to Hippocrates to Galen, okay, to your European Renaissance, to the Industrial Revolution, and to the modern era. My dear friends, I want you to understand the significance of this act. I want you to understand the significance of this history, because as a result of this, several lives were saved. Workers have become more aware of dangers which are connected to the work. Okay, on a lighter note, okay, how OSH is important is because if you have seen any television channels or movies, probably since we are in India, olden days movies, as you call the Bollywood movies, it is to so happen that if there's any accident which takes place, the employer used to give lots of amount, lots of cash to the worker and say, you take the responsibility of this, I will take care of your family. Okay, so as a result of this, what is happening is the employer used to always go scot free. But with the evolution of OSH 1970, even the employer is liable to be tied to any accident or injury which happens. My dear friends, as I finish this session, I would like to bring to you information about this boy whom you see on your right hand screen. Okay, he's a young American factory worker. His name is Harry McShane. He was probably 16 years when this photograph was taken. Okay, this boy had a very unfortunate accident. His hand was caught in the belt of a machine. Okay, probably in the year 1908. Unfortunately, his arm was pulled off near the shoulder. His right leg was broken through the kneecap. 16 years old. Okay, he has no hand, one of his hand was lost, his leg was broken, but not even one dime compensation was paid to him. He had been working in the factory for more than 2 years when the accident happened, but nobody cared for him. It is one of these incidents which has led to the evolution of OSH. With this few words, I end this presentation. These are the references for your kind perusal. In the subsequent class, we shall be dealing with Occupational Safety and Health Administration. So thank you, friends. Thank you for your kind patience. And now I leave the session open for any queries that you might have. Thank you.